Here's Just the Feels to make the worst arguments against Marxism for one last time.
When I was in college studying economics, I was briefly under the delusion that Marxists were human beings like you and me, and they could adjust their position in response to logical arguments.
Come at
I
me.
engaged one in conversation as a believer in market economics, and she asked me what I, as a capitalist, made of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Well, I replied, I don't know what that is. Could you please explain it to me? Oh, it's not very hard. It's just the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Right, but I've not heard that term in any of my economics classes, not even the ones that cover Das Kapital and other things written by Marx. So could you please just tell me what it is so I can give you a...
And they clearly omitted that crucial part of capitalist framework to avoid reducing liberalism to utter absurdity. The tendency for the rate of profit to fall is defined by the ratio of profits made to the amount capital firms have invested in themselves to fall, as defined by Marx in chapter 13 of the third volume of Capital. And, as with many components of Marxist theory, it wasn't the first one to bring attention to it because Smith, Mill, Ricardo, and Jevons all mentioned it. It's a core component of crisis theory, which puts the barrier of capitalist production as capital. To make it more succinct, Marx also states in the same volume of Capital, quote, in short, the same development of the social productivity of labor expresses itself in the course of capitalist development on the one hand, in a tendency to a progressive fall of the rate of profit, and on the other hand, a progressive increase of the absolute mass of the appropriated surplus value, or profit, so that on the whole of a relative decrease of variable capital and profit is accompanied by an absolute increase of both. Do you get it?
The leftist paused for a moment and smirked. You don't get to speak to me like that, she replied, and walked away. I was left with just one question. What the fuck is the tendency of the rate of the profit to fall? Eventually I would discover what it truly was. Yet another reason to disregard all Marxist...
So then you didn't know what it was.
This is the third and final part of my series on why the best use for Das Kapital is emergency toilet paper, and we'll be taking on a concept once called the backbone of revolutionary Marxism.
I will show you where I have made my home, whilst preparing to bring justice. Then I will break you.
This video will have to gloss over some of the details to be moderately entertaining, but we'll be thorough enough to end this series on a high note. We'll examine the theory in depth, we'll lay out why its predictions have failed, and lastly we'll lay out why its predictions seem like they succeed sometimes. And hopefully I'll avoid boring you to death along the way. If any of this sounds appealing to you, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and hitting the bell button for notifications on future videos to help the channel. So what is the TRPF? TERF? TERF? We'll call it the TERF. The TERF is Marx's way of conceiving of technological progress under capitalism. As technology happens, the manpower costs of producing one more unit of product...
That's not what the tendency of the rate of profit to fall is. It's the ratio of profits to invested capital to decrease over time, and the root cause or causes of it haven't been determined yet. You clearly don't understand the nuance of the theory. Assuming demand remains constant, capitalists will invest greater amounts of money into production, allowing them to produce more commodities. The rate of profit falls both because capitalists are investing more money, and because there's too great a supply of commodities to be coveted as they once were.
Therefore, in order to save costs, the capitalist fires workers. Since only workers can create real output, total output falls and unemployment rises.
That's the opposite of what the theory states. Output increases as technology advances in its productive ability because hiring workers would be superfluous according to Marx.
Total profits fall as well, and we can see that it was the capitalists' hubris that led them to their end. Their drive for profits was the destruction of their profits. How Shakespearean.
Yet again, as with all your conception of Marx's theories, your understanding of this is erroneous. Profit falls because capitalists are investing more money and selling less of their commodities because there's a greater supply of it in the economy. If economists like you, I actually don't think he's an economist, are taught on neoclassical principles, shouldn't supply and demand be a sufficient explanation for as to why the profit falls?
Capitalist economic theory has little to say in response to the TERF for a variety of reasons, but if
Marxist economics are based on classical theories.
Change, we can cobble together an answer from the works of a bunch of different scholars. Technological change and how it influences jobs is a long and complicated topic that you could write an entire book on, or several. And so we're going to have to play a bit fast and loose to get to the juicy stuff here. It's true that technological progress reduces the cost of producing a certain number of goods, so you could just cut workers to cut costs and produce the same number of goods with lower costs, but why would you do that when you could produce more goods?
Wow, you really don't understand crisis theory. Marx theorized that they're producing more stuff anyway, with or without workers, because the technology is so productive.
And if technology means that each worker can produce more relative to their wage than before, it would make more sense to increase your costs and hire more workers instead of less. This is why every serious model of economics under capitalism says that if costs fall due to technology increasing, you see an increase in employment in competitive markets.
There are multiple things wrong with this claim. First of all, the TRPTF and crisis theory as a whole were originally conceived of by Smith, Ricardo, Mill, and Jevons, i.e. it is capitalist economics. Second of all, who brought up competitive markets specifically? The postulate from the Marxists here is, because capitalists are investing more into advanced technology to produce more and demand is remaining constant, they're making less of a profit.
So now that we have the two theories ready, we can examine reality and determine which model was right. I'll give you a hint. It's the one that wasn't left.
Wrong.
As technology has increased and costs have fallen in areas such as computer chip production, production has increased and employment hasn't fallen. If we look at the world overall, we can see that outside of economic crises, which have nothing to do with this, global unemployment has fallen while technological advancement has only gotten faster and faster.
First off, that's both a lie and a misinterpretation of his own data. If his graph is showing global unemployment over time, then why is it going up? Or if it isn't, that's clearly not a stagnation or a dip. I have a better, more thoroughly presented source. See the top right. Why are you critiquing the computer chip industry in particular? It's a new and emerging market, and Marx was specifically honing in on markets that have long histories but are now adapting to the capitalist mode of production post-mercantilism. The theory posits that under conditions in which capitalists invest greater and greater amounts into machinery, the market is flooded with that specific commodity. Because computers have only been around for so long, it's tough to say what's happening to that market specifically, but you clearly haven't examined any empirical data that literally illustrates the rate of profit falling.
All of this is in line with capitalist theory. If you're trying to maximize profits, it makes sense to hire more workers when productivity goes up.
The technology allows them to produce more with less workers.
Each worker has the most productivity relative to their wage. You have to build massive factories, and so you
Wrong. Theory postulates that as technology advances, capitalists' need for workers is absolved.
Told Marx got it wrong. Big surprise there. But there are a few areas where it might look like he got it right to an untrained eye. So let's get those eyes of yours trained. The first area is the loss of jobs following automation in the auto industry in America. Isn't it true that we saw massive amounts of automation there in recent decades? And isn't it true that a large amount of jobs was lost? Why, I do believe that's checkmate, capitalists. Well, no, because those jobs weren't lost. They were moved to Mexico and other Latin American countries.
I don't care. Global unemployment has risen over time.
To the extent that those jobs were lost, which is real, worldwide employment numbers for a lot of car companies has gone down.
Wait, what? Both your bar graphs show the number of auto employees and annual growth rate of auto employees decreasing over time. Holy shit!
This has gone down. It's because cars aren't like most goods. You can't sell someone twice the cars they would otherwise buy, though you can sell twice the amount of many other commodities.
What does that have to do with anything?
And our last point to consider is why some industries limit production to maximize profits. Even capitalist economic models will tell you that when markets aren't competitive, firms can come together and agree to produce less and charge a higher price to maximize profits.
TRPTF specifically involves circumstances in which they're maximizing production because of technological gains.
Sounds like some solid turf. But let's wait a minute. Turf tells us that as technology and productivity per worker increases, employment decreases and production decreases.
Wrong. Production increases as technology advances and capitalists spend more on production. That's what TRPTF tackles.
There are a bunch of complicated graphs which can be used to prove this, and this is just one of the simpler ones, but they all say the same thing. Production increases when costs are decreasing.
But the theory deals specifically with capitalists who are diverting more capital into production.
If you want to learn more, feel free to waste 4 years of your life earning an econ degree like I did. So, that's the end of 3 videos ranting about an economic doctrine that's dead and buried, which no longer matters at all.
Massive
So
cope.
I'd like to think. Sadly, this series, or at least the idea that it's trying to put forth, which is that Marxism is wrong.
He's right, the only one who's wrong here is you.
Marxism isn't just going around with a red flag talking about liquidating the kulaks. It's a set of ideas and doctrine about how the world works. Even if you're not fully on board with Stalin, you can still operate in the Marxist framework with Marxist concepts, and no building with a bad foundation can stand for long, regardless of the strength of its columns. When Bernie Sanders talks about millionaires and billionaires stealing from your paycheck, he's talking about surplus value, and he's wrong.
That's correct.
When people talk about a lack of education being the cause of terrorism, they're talking about the materialist versions of history, and that's Marxist and wrong. When every single one of your philosophy and political science professors assigns you a work based on Karl Marx, or just assigns you the works of Karl Marx himself, they are setting you up to have a poor understanding of the world in general. Marxist doctrine has deep roots in our society today, but it has no positive value or truth to offer us, and those are just the facts.
Literally everything you just said is the opposite of the facts. Just the feels. Literally every last fucking word of what you said throughout this entire series has been a completely and totally inaccurate straw man of Marxist theory. You have zero understanding of the descriptive nature of these concepts, and in your videos you do nothing but pivot to absolutely irrelevant talking points and hyperfixate on specific examples that do nothing to debunk Marxism because your understanding of it is so removed, and idiotically at that. All of what you've said is false. You've lied the whole time, you don't adhere to any facts, and I have objectively destroyed you. Stop making videos.